Hello, my name is Justin McLuhan. I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about Katheryn Bigelow, the director that for a long time when someone would go, oh, we should get a woman director for this, everybody in the message boards would be like, Katheryn Bigelow, Katheryn Bigelow, Katheryn Bigelow, because they seemingly knew nobody else.
Well, because if you're the sort of person who writes on the IMDb message board, you're probably a 16-year-old boy.
Yes.
And what do you like in movies when you're a 16-year-old boy on the IMDb message board? You like big, flashy camera moves, really kind of muscular energy. You like big men with big balls.
I mean, I don't know if...
Big themes of loyalty and friendship and betrayal. Yeah, ostentatious, big movies that are movies.
So I like Point Break?
Yes, you like Point Break.
Because other than that, it's weird as you go through her career that she is the perfect auteurist study because you can see where she starts and you can see where she evolves from there. Because her first film, The Loveless, is a very arty take on like 50s youth pictures.
And then in the 80s and 90s, she becomes very associated with studio action movies, K-19, The Widowmaker. She acquires a vague air of disrepute, I think.
Which is weird because if you watch most of her movies and reading about her and interviews with her, she likes to talk about what she wanted to do was deconstruct genre tropes. She got started studying art in university. That's what she did for a big chunk of her career.
And when she moved to New York, she was roommates with Julian Schnabel. She was friends, of course, with Lizzie Borden. You know, not necessarily the crowd that you would expect her to hang out with if you've only seen Point Break.
Yeah, because I think that Point Break is so associated with her because that was the big hit. That's what people think all of her movies are.
But while she had that vague air of disrepute in the 90s and the early 2000s, now, thanks to The Hurt Locker and also Zero Dark 30, she's one of the most celebrated American filmmakers around. And she's certainly one of the 2 or 3 best-known female filmmakers.
Without a doubt. I mean, she's the first woman to ever win an Oscar for Best Directing.
And I mean, she makes movies that are very, if you'll pardon me, masculine seeming, you know? Like, she makes movies that are... one associates with those kind of like film bro directors, her ex-husband James Cameron or a Quentin Tarantino or a David Fincher.
But I do think that that's like the entry point to these movies, and it's the way that she kind of tells the stories that makes her filmmaking different from like an anonymous kind of journeyman director who are also making these blockbusters. I mean, Near Dark is the one that for a long time for The Hurt Locker, if you mentioned Katheryn Bigelow's name, this vampire western that she did that was not a success when it came out, to the point that it was almost a lost film, that they almost lost the negative.
That's insane.
Before it got scanned to DVD and it got saved right at the last minute, was the one that people would go, oh, this is the masterpiece.
And it is quite a beautiful, strange movie, just a weirdly paced and just haunted
just like
with atmosphere.
Pure 80s as well.
Oh, yeah.
Is that like every frame exudes that kind of like music video look, but in a more language style than you're usually used to.
I mean, all of her films are symphonies of one perfect shots, to mix my metaphors.
To a certain point, because like I said at the beginning, is that you can see her evolve through her filmmaking, tackling a subject and approaching it in a way to like, how can I get the most out of this topic, until that radically changed with The Hurt Locker. I mean, The Hurt Locker is the movie that everybody knows her from, and it's a movie that I think I saw when it came out and I thought it was fine. And I was a little bit surprised that it was as popular as it was.
I mean, it was released as an independent film, or, well, a studio indie, I think it made something like $15 million at the box office, but it ended up dominating all the critic polls that year. And you'll remember at the Oscars, it won Best Picture over Avatar. And now it's sort of one of the most beloved movies of its decade, I would speculate.
And watching it just recently, I was like, it's fine. It's not for me.
Right.
The style that she utilizes in this film is so far away from what she was kind of building up through up until Strange Days and K-19, The Widowmaker, that it's not something that I like. It's something that's also become everyday, this handheld, shaky style.
And I think it was already sort of everyday by the time this movie was made, because with the handheld shaky cam in The Hurt Locker, it's coded as authentic. Like, oh, look at the docu-realism of this. And it's coded as artier.
There's a film where it's only people in combat that I think is much more interesting than the film that she made, where it's Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie, and they're just out in the field doing these long kind of missions that you see them in the movie, that sometimes there's a scene with a sniper where they're just sitting there forever. And that kind of almost anti-action cinema I found really interesting, but all the kind of rote stuff where it's like Jeremy Renner meets a kid, right. Jeremy Renner wants to take revenge. I can understand you'd be like, oh, it's a deconstruction of that stuff, but it just didn't work for me in any way.
Well, it's funny that this movie was the one that elevated her to the A-list and that turned her into a really celebrated and esteemed director, because if you took away the sort of arty trappings of it, the shaky cam, the rapid editing, if you shot it like Point Break, it would be Point Break.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a story about a hotshot explosions expert.
Who loves adrenaline? That's what he's always going for.
He's taking off his suit because if he's going to die comfortable.
I actually find that the story of Hurt Locker is a little bit less interesting than that of Point Break.
Yeah.
In that kind of approach of like, the adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's this hotshot guy and he's up against his by-the-book team, which is, you know, the sort of story that you see a lot. I mean, the fact that the movie has no plot, it's sort of a series of set pieces, is kind of interesting. I guess maybe that's where this deconstructionist impulse comes in.
That's why, like, if it was just those set pieces, I think the film would be more interesting. Instead of the stuff that you're like, okay, I see where you're going with this, because this is just a trope. And because other than the big, long set pieces, there's not that much deconstructing going on.
I actually agree with you. I think it would be more interesting if you basically knew nothing about these guys except their competence at their job.
Yes.
You know?
Because, like, when you're introduced to a character and you're like, well, this character exists only to die.
Yes.
And then he dies, you're like, okay, that doesn't have that much dramatic weight for me.
It's interesting that this is one of the only Iraq War movies to resonate. This and American Sniper, I think, are the only two Iraq War movies that were big hits.
Yeah.
If not immediately, then over time. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that, I mean, the first wave of Iraq War movies, you'll remember, were anti-Iraq movies. They were like In the Valley of Allah by the same writer, I think, Mark Bull, or Stop Loss or Gunner Palace, those movies. And this movie and American Sniper are both sort of ambiguous, quote unquote. They are not.
I feel like the Hurt Locker's pretty anti-Iraq war. A character looks around and he's like, what is all this stuff doing? Why is it here?
Well, yeah, okay. So some of that stuff is thrown in, but it's also a movie it's ambiguous about the thrill of war. Like, it opens with that Chris Hedges quote, "War is a drug."
Yes, and it's treated like a video game as well. Like Jeremy Renner shoots a guy and he's like, you don't get to play anymore, or something like that.
And I think it's left purposely ambiguous as to whether we're supposed to think it's good that war is a drug. Like, I mean, so that quote...
It's bad.
Well, that quote at the beginning of the movie signals that it's bad. But if you didn't have that quote at the beginning of the movie, you may look at this movie and say, oh, look at this cool guy who, you know, he may be reckless, but gosh darn it, he loves his country and he's a real man, you know?
But the idea is that he doesn't... I mean, I think the movie gives you enough ammunition that he doesn't love his country. He's just doing it for the thrill of it.
Yeah,
because he goes home, then he goes back at the end because this is all he knows. And it's not even specifically for his country. You never get any indication that they're doing something right, or they're doing something toward any kind of goal.
But I think, in a way, that's what Katheryn Bigelow admires about the Jeremy Renner character, because, like, she may not like the war, you know, she may be a liberal, but she admires the fighting spirit of these tough men, you know?
I mean, I didn't see that, but I guess maybe I'm giving her more faith than you are. I mean, the fact that she has stuck to these kind of, like, war themes, Hurt Locker onward, would lead me to believe that maybe you're right. Maybe she is interested in this, like Zero Dark 30, which we're not going to talk about because neither of us like the movie.
No, I mean, can we address it briefly?
Sure.
It's boring.
Yes. I mean, I remember liking it only because it was it's a Mad World style cast of insane C-listers just in main roles. Like, hey, that's the guy from Torchwood and the Doctor Who show, John Barrowman.
I believe one of the Duplass brothers is in it.
Scott Adkins in a non-fighting role, like sharing the screen.
I totally forgot that Scott Adkins was in it.
Yeah, he's just there. So it must have been like a conscious decision on her part. And I mean, Chris Pratt, before he was Chris Pratt, just when he was the Parks and Recs guy, as the the leader that goes into like the final Bin Laden assassination.
And we might as well just address the torture issue, which for those of us who have a chip on our shoulder about Katheryn Bigelow now.
I remember when I watched the movie, do they get any information from the torture? I feel they don't.
Well, I
think they show torture, but they don't it doesn't lead them to anything.
I think the movie takes on I can't remember, but no. I think the movie takes on this very studiously like neutral, objective tone towards the torture. In taking on this neutral, objective tone, you endorse it.
Okay.
That's what I think. It's like, I hate to bring up Glenn Greenwald, but he was the person who was like waving the flag, accusing this movie of being propaganda. And he had a quote that I think is actually maybe pertinent. He said, "It presents torture as its CIA proponents and administrators see it, as a dirty, ugly business that is necessary to protect Americans." And I know Zizek also accused it of just sort of normalizing the idea of torture, which I think is probably true. But I haven't seen it since it came out,
Me neither.
What do I know?
Well, you've been listening to Michael and Us. I'm Luke Savage.
Let's just say coming soon to an episode of Michael and Us.
You guys are watching Zero Dark 30?
I mean, I'm sure we'll get it to it eventually. It seems right up our alley.
All right, so now we've gotten all the homework out of the way. Let's just jump to the fun stuff. Point Break.
Point Break. Love it. Great film.
This is a film that I remember when I saw it, didn't do much for me.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. This is the same problem I had with all the action films I watched in my teens. It wasn't like a John Woo style, like...
John Woo really ruined things for you, didn't he?
It did. It's like I see the greatest art masterpieces in the world, and then they're like, oh, look at these other artists. And I'm like, oh, but the style, it's not like this.
It's funny, I was watching Point Break this time and thinking this feels so much like a John Woo movie.
It does in terms of the homoeroticism between the two main characters. In the idea that Keanu Reeves, this young, hotshot cop who wants to prove himself, and Patrick Swayze as this cool, laid-back dude who they see eye to eye as criminals and as the law. And, for the record, robbing banks is a victimless crime.
Yeah, I agree.
But Patrick Swayze just takes it too far in this movie.
Yeah.
And there's that anecdote that comes up all the time that, like, Keanu Reeves would have played the Patrick Swayze role, and Patrick Swayze would have played the Keanu Reeves role. That makes sense on paper, and Katheryn Bigelow switched it, and it plays even better that way.
I think it does play better with them in their current roles because Patrick Swayze is a more demonstrative actor than Keanu Reeves is. So like it helps to have the villain be more charismatic,
And Keanu Reeves is though
he's conflicted.
Yeah, but I mean, as an actor, he is the surfer dude, like, whoa, man! Mostly because Bill and Ted put him in that position.
Yeah, that's true.
But then you see him as this, like, straight-laced FBI guy with charisma dynamo,
Gary Busey.
Gary Busey.
I think Gary Busey rules in this movie, by the way.
Gary Busey's great in this film.
I mean, I think the casting of this movie is really great because she's got these three actors who just are so into it. They commit so hard and there's no irony there.
No, there's no irony. And that's what makes this movie work. And that's why it echoes John Woo's film so much, is that it is committed to its premise without a hint of sarcasm or like, we're better than this.
And I mean, I believe that Katheryn Bigelow knows the movie's ridiculous, but also that it doesn't matter.
Yes,
she loves it. She loves the bank robbers, and she loves just as she loves the thrill of skydiving and surfing. How very well she communicates the thrill of those things visually.
I think that's the most important part. Is that like this is about surfers and crazy guys, but it also shows you like this is fun.
Yeah.
You understand why they would want to do this kind of stuff.
I mean, that skydiving scene where the actors are actually skydiving and you basically follow them down is unbelievable. It's pure cinema.
And I didn't see the Point Break remake that came out a few years ago. Why would you? But I can just imagine what it felt like, and it's not like that. Because there's never a moment in this film where unreality takes you out of it, short of like, you see them like you see their faces as they're skydiving. No cameraman got that, but it doesn't matter because people were skydiving and doing this crazy stuff in the film.
And she shoots the bank robberies like she shoots surfing and skydiving. A lot of crazy long takes and a lot of one perfect shots.
Well, the thing that I found so amazing about Katheryn Bigelow rewatching all her films this week is just the sheer physicality of them. Up until The Hurt Locker, she's like pushing it as far as it can go from a style standpoint and through the action scenes that are happening. Like, The action scene that everybody talks about where Keanu Reeves and the FBI break into that drug dealer's den, led by Vincent Klein, the villain from Cyborg, the Albert Pune film.
Of course.
There's so many little gags, like a guy getting pinned behind a door and shooting his own foot. The fact that they like go through the window and then wrestle and almost get a face in a lawnmower.
And then there's an incredible foot chase scene between Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze right after.
Her take on Raising Arizona.
Right, where it's, a handheld camera, much like The Evil Dead. A camera going right through the neighborhood. And, I mean, her films at their best are really unpredictable.
Yeah.
Like, anything can happen in them. And that applies also to The Hurt Locker, even, There's a feeling that anybody could die at any moment. In that chase scene in Point Break, like, you were with them in that chase scene.
And from a script standpoint, like, the movie makes such a great decision that, like, Patrick Swayze figures out that Keanu Reeves is an agent, and there's still like 50 minutes left to go to the movie. So you're like, what are they gonna do? And that, like, butting heads is why I think the movie is so memorable. If it had just ended with Patrick Swayze being like, no, you're an FBI officer, I don't think the movie would be as strong as it is.
I mean, the skydiving scene is so good because you know that he knows.
Yes, and that Keanu Reeves knows that they know.
Right.
And they're just playing around with each other.
Yeah.
And Patrick Swayze as a character, too. My memory of him was being, like, super cool and in control. And that's the way he positions himself. But you quickly learn that, like, oh no, like, he's looking for something doing all this stuff, but he will also go too far. There's never a, like, oh, Patrick Swayze's just like a good guy and Keanu Reeves wants to take him down.
By the way, another word about Gary Busey.
Of course, great in Silver Bullet.
Of course, you've seen Under Siege,
yes,
which he's in. And I just saw Lost Highway again. He's in it. And he has a scene in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas around the same time. And then that was about it for him. He was in a bunch of these movies with interesting, good directors.
He's in Big Wednesday. Have you ever seen that one?
No,
Speaking of surfing, yeah, the John Milius one. Great movie, great summer movie to watch. Too.
I just think it's a shame that Gary Busey has become like a village idiot and a punchline.
So supposedly Gary Busey got into a car accident
and he got brain damage.
Yeah, and things have not been the same since then.
Well, it's too bad. And I when you see how actually talented he was, I find it sad that he's just a figure of mirth now. He's
one of those guys that, like, you look at him and you go, well, he can't be anything but a character actor. But, like, he can lead your movie or be a supporting role because he's that strong and that charismatic. And he has that presence.
Maybe we should check out the Buddy Holly story.
Oh, his early film. I've never seen it yet.
Yeah, neither have I.
I'm very curious. Patreon episode.
Maybe.
So, other than Point Break, I mean, she also made Blue Steel, which I really enjoyed when I watched it this week. And I know that you didn't get a chance to see it, so I'll just go through it as quickly as possible.
You told me it's like almost like her proto Me Too movie.
Yeah, because it plays like a fever dream. Like, realism doesn't really have a place in this universe in the sense that it's Jamie Lee Curtis as a cop on her first day on the job. She blows away Tom Sizemore, who's a criminal, and Ron Silver witnesses it all, and he steals the gun from the scene. And he starts killing people with the gun that Tom Sizemore had and framing Jamie Lee Curtis. And no men will believe Jamie Lee Curtis that it's Ron Silver, that Tom Sizemore had a gun. No matter how much evidence or how many witnesses there were, people are like, oh no, that's not what's really happening. So it's up to Jamie Lee Curtis by herself to have to deal with the situation because nobody else is there. And, like, she has a love interest with Clancy Brown, and he actually gets injured instead of her, so she has to step up again. And it's just a really fascinating movie that it would feel much different and would probably be very different if it was directed by anyone but her. Because her perspective on it just kind of, like, elevates all of it. And her style, which is at full bloom here. People are constantly asking her, why are you a cop? Why would a pretty woman like you become a cop? And she's like, I like to shoot people. I like to jam people up against the wall. And
you say that people are always, like, telling her that she's making up the story.
Right. Nobody believing her. Like, even Tom Sizemore, when he gets shot and he had the gun in his hand, there were a bunch of witnesses, and they're like, oh, they were seeing things. You acted with too much force. Just crazy stuff like that.
You also watched K-19 The Widowmaker.
I did watch K-19 The Widowmaker. I enjoyed it, but I can understand why people hated it. It's basically her come and see. Because have you seen it recently?
No.
So the film is about the Russians want to rush a nuclear submarine and they go do a test on it, even though that Liam Neeson is like, it's not ready, but Harrison Ford is in charge, and they kind of just push it into the ocean and like, go do it. And everything goes wrong. The reactor fails. People at one point have to go into the reactor with no suits, so they're all melty and horrible and they die. This happens multiple times. It's just a parade of misery that she shoots like a crazy action film. And at the end, the people in charge, Harrison Ford, who made all these mistakes, gets honored. If I give this a bad faith reading, it's like, oh yeah, you know, she does think these people are heroes. The film gives no ammunition. These people are terrible, but at the end of the day, history remembers that they were heroes and that they were good, while everybody else, the drones that had to go and fix the reactors, they're the bad guys. And I can understand people going to the theater. This was a big release.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it was the biggest independent film at the time.
Oh, was it?
It's a film that was produced by National Geographic, which I've never seen at the beginning of a film. And that all it does is there's no villain other than Harrison Ford, which people probably going to see the movie thought he was the hero. Mm-hmm. And that anything that happens is just because of the shitty Russian technology, and that the people in charge didn't take the time to check stuff, and that it just all failed, and that the only people to blame are the bureaucrats, essentially. The people running, you know, all the stuff.
You sold me on it. I actually want to see it now for the first time ever.
If you go in thinking that's what the movie is, and she shoots it like an action movie too, it's like the camera swirling and crazy, I can understand why people were pissed off, and I can also understand what she was trying to do, and that nobody, you know, they didn't want that.
Something that I noticed watching her movies this week is, you don't need strong powers of observation to notice that they are all very long.
Yes.
And
they are not. Blue Steel is like 85 minutes.
And
Near Dark is 90
Near
minutes.
Dark's 90 minutes or so. But a lot of them are very long, and they're long in a way that you really feel. Mm-hmm. They do not fly by. You live in them, and the fact that they don't unfold like, you know, perfect 3-act movies, they feel very accumulative. Mm-hmm. Like by the end of Point Break, you feel like you've really, like when they're finally on that beach together and he's arresting Patrick Swayze, you're saying, oh my God, Patrick Swayze, give up. Holy shit.
And her first movie, Loveless, is like 82 minutes. So she's like building her way up, making bigger. Sergio Leone syndrome. Yeah. The next one has to be bigger. It has to be like different.
I mean, both Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 are designed, I think, to wear you down by the end.
Like Point Break, you're like, isn't the movie over? And as I'm watching, I'm like, I know it's not over because I know that they meet at the end one more time.
Right, right. And anyway, I definitely felt the length of 1995's Strange Days.
I love Strange Days.
I like Strange Days.
It was everything that I wanted Southland Tales to be.
Yes.
It even has the same plot. It's about police shooting a video that everybody's after.
So it's set in the distant dystopian future of 1999, and this was a movie that was made right after the LA riots. And so in this movie's vision of the future, the riots have basically never ended. And they're this constant state, like this din that's happening all over society. And, you know, the economy isn't working for anybody. Things are bad, folks. It looks like it's 2019. So people retreat into internet porn. Well, not actually internet porn. They retreat into another very topical thing at the time, virtual reality.
Which is essentially GoPro footage. Yeah. Like, that's what it is. Hardcore Henry-ish, if you will.
Very much so. And Ray Fiennes plays this sort of disgraced guy who is like the big mogul for this technology.
But he's scuzzy. He's like scuzzy. A rat, and he has no money. He's always like talking his way out of situations.
He may as well be a drug dealer, but he's like he provides everybody with this stuff, and he gives little mini CDs that they can implant into this thing that goes into their head, and they get to experience other people's memories or recorded incidents that actually happen, and they get to experience those. He himself is often revisiting memories of his times having sex with his ex-girlfriend, played by Juliette Lewis.
Yes, that's right. And at the same time, he's kind of exploiting his friends, illustrated by Angela Bassett as a limo driver that he had once helped as a police officer. And he's kind of squeezing her dry, asking for favors, asking for rides, as his life kind of spirals more and more out of control. And he had his good friend Tom Sizemore, who could not be a villain in any way, right?
Can't possibly be.
And it takes 50 minutes for this film to actually kick into its plot. And I loved every moment of it. And I didn't think I was gonna. I actually said, I don't want to watch Strange Days. When I started, I was like 2.5 hours.
I wasn't going to watch it either, but then you DM'd me and said it's like a good Southland tale.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, okay, well, I've got a long train ride ahead of me. I'll watch it.
Well, where Southland Tales doesn't give a good indication of the world, this one is all about the world.
Yeah.
Like, anytime someone drives down the street, there's people being beat up, fires. You feel like you could go into any pocket and stuff is happening.
It's a stunning technical achievement.
Mm-hmm.
He's always going into these big, like, mosh pits and stuff. And LA has a Times Square-like New Year's celebration. So, yeah, it's like a big Where's Waldo picture.
But for all the setup, that, like, the first 50 minutes play like Martin Scorsese Goodfellas, like the camera zooming around, everybody's doing stuff. It boils down to, it's just a neo-noir with, like, a femme fatale and a villain and double crosses and I can't believe it was you!
I was a bit disappointed by the last 30 or so minutes of it.
I thought it was fine. That's when it, like, cemented into that kind of, you know, the genre neo-noir reveal. And that physicality is still there in the action scenes.
Yeah, it was just such a conventional wrap-up to a rather unconventional movie.
The film has the perfect ending, which is chaos erupts and chaos continues. And instead, it fucking... a deus ex machina that would never happen. I'm gonna spoil Strange Days here.
You've had 25 years to see it, folks.
So basically, they're all looking for a video where a kind of political figure, rapper, is killed by the police. And, I mean, at first I'm like, what difference would it make if they released the video? According to this film, chaos is going on the streets at all times.
Yeah.
But okay, to buy into the film, it would make a difference if this video were released. And Angela Bassett is like, we need to put this out. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than you. This is like the police doing this stuff. And I think the script makes a very smart move that it reveals that it's not a premeditated murder. It was just violence that came out of nowhere, like in the moment, which is, yes, usually how these things happen. Suddenly a riot breaks out at the end of the movie where the people that are celebrating the coming year 2000 are disgusted by, like, these police officers beating Angela Bassett. And everybody,
Rodney King style.
Everybody goes mad. And then suddenly the commissioner of the police stops things and goes, I watched the tape. And you're right. Arrest these men. What the fuck is this bullshit?
That's bad.
This would never happen. Unless it's like a weird... I mean, this is given a lot of credit that, like, Angela Bassett and Ralph are just going to be taken off to the side and killed so they can sweep this under the rug.
Yeah.
That would make sense. But, like, this is a movie building to the video being released and chaos just breaking out. And it just never does. And that feels like studio notes that were, like, pushed across the table.
Yeah. One thing I do like about the movie, though, is it feels prescient in the way that you've got this society collapsing around you, and so people increasingly retreat into fantasy.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, online or I don't know,
Podcasts.
Podcasts, porn.
Yeah, that's
you know,
right.
Whatever. I mean, the way that porn, for instance, has evolved since that.
It's literally what it is in Strange Days.
Exactly. It's become much more intimate.
I mean, I don't have a VR headset yet, but soon, right, Will?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
And you could hook up your flashlight, and you don't even have to move.
What if that flashlight goes wrong, though, and just rips your dick off?
Oh, it's like in modern times, the feeding machine.
Yeah. Except it was VR pornography. If only Charles Chaplin were here today to bring that to life. I'd probably be in prison as well. All right, so... oh, hopefully. And her last film, Detroit, I did not see.
Didn't see. It looked like a chore.
Yeah, it did. But I think that, like, I mean, we didn't even talk about the fact that for a long time she was just derided throughout her career. Like, you found some articles. Well, we won't say who wrote them, but oh boy, were they rough.
Yeah.
Like,
well, before The Hurt Locker, you know, her best movie was this sort of culty thing. Or the movie that was considered her best movie was Near Dark, and Point Break was not respected.
Blue Steel, in the reviews I could find of the era, was just treated as a slasher film, as opposed to the kind of deconstruction of this idea. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis being in the scenario is not an accident, considering that she was one of the people who started the final girl tropes, and now it's like going head to head with what that actually means. And, you know, I would hope that she doesn't make more films like The Hurt Locker, but looking at her upcoming films, they seem to be more war pictures. I feel like that's where her kind of interests lie. Like, she took things as far as they could go, as action films, and now she wants to make something real. And that translates to stuff like The Hurt Locker, which doesn't interest me that much. Maybe it will one day.
It's also not even real, so...
No, it's not. But it's the illusion of realness, right? Something like Detroit or Zero Dark 30 or The Hurt Locker. We're presenting it as it is.
I'll tell you what's real. The emotions I felt watching Point Break.
At the end.
When Patrick Swayze goes out for that one last surf.
Did you? You felt emotional?
I definitely felt it, yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope people revisit her films, especially Blue Steel and Strange Days. Just buckle in knowing what you're getting.
So last week on the podcast, we talked about our first Blu-ray release, The Dragon Lives Again. We didn't expect it to sell out.
We did not.
But it did.
Yes.
So there will be more releases.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to do monthly. I mean, if there's interest there, and I mean, people haven't gotten it yet, they may be like, what is this garbage? And throw it up against the wall.
Well, you've got a good commentary coming your way. But yeah, Justin's Gold Ninja Video label will have various...
basically the way that we're splitting it is, if I'm doing it monthly, it's going to be an Important Cinema Club kind of like Poverty Row-ish kind of thing.
A bargain bin, a public domain special edition.
And then kind of public domain, gray markety films from around the world. Mostly martial arts pictures. Stuff that readily available on YouTube. This is what I want to say to people is that like the movies that we'll be releasing, you could watch right now. Because this is stuff that we haven't remastered and that is just out in the world. You're paying for the special features. So if you bought that Dragon Lives Again disc and you're expecting like a widescreen remastered version of the movie, buckle up because that's not what you're getting.
But folks, look for the Easter eggs.
Yes. Look for the Easter eggs because there is something that is worth the price of admission. Or two somethings.
Yeah.
But one specifically that, oh boy, you're very lucky to have that.
That's a good one. Anyway, more releases coming soon.
Yes. And because so many people asked me, and it's something I don't want to do because I put a number on it, like 125. But like a lot of people were like, it's sold out. Like I just listened to the episode today and it was gone. And it was. I released it on Twitter before I dropped an episode, and that was my mistake. I did not think it would have that kind of reaction, and that this is something for Important Cinema Club listeners. Like that's who it's for. So from now on, Patreon subscribers will hear about the release first. I'll make sure that'll be the first place where they can hear about it. And I'm also doing a mailing list. If you go to goldninjavideo.com, you can sign up for it now. It's right at the top. And we'll let you know when a new release is being put out. And if you're on Patreon, I am going to release a handful more discs. Not that many. I have to look at how many left I have printed. For Patreon subscribers, just message me on Patreon if you would like a copy, and I will direct you to where you can go up until I have no more. And then I'll have to be like, I'm sorry, we're sold out.
But you can just go watch The Dragon Lives Again on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. I mean, I did go and make sure it was properly matted at the correct frame rate and change the titles. But yeah, it's on YouTube as well. And we'll have more coming up.
Yeah.
And the next one is something that we've talked about before and that we both love. We haven't revisited in a long time, and I'm very excited to
It's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So
letters. Do we have any letters?
We do have letters. As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Tristan Wheeler, and it goes, "Hey gang, I've been a fan of your podcast since I moved to Toronto in early May. Maybe it's something in the big city air that awakes one filmic consciousness to your show.
I don't think that's true, actually.
Either way, thank you for giving me a place to learn about weird, bad, and amazing movies that litter this world inside and outside of the mainstream. I do, however, have a question. Where do you stand on cinematic reimaginings? For lack of a better word, movies where a new or the same director takes a movie's essence or idea but does something completely new with it. I ask because also I don't love it. I haven't been able to shake Guadagnino's Suspiria since I watched it in December."
That's the Suspiria remake.
Yes. Thanks for the balcony, Tristan.
Well, I think it doesn't happen that often, actually, because for the most part, movies are part of a franchise
and they don't want to move out of it.
Exactly. So you get a movie like, I don't know, The Amazing Spider-Man or something like that,
God.
which is just the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, but not as good.
What about Len Wiseman's Total Recall remake?
Yeah, or I don't know, probably the Point Break remake.
Yeah, nobody watched it. I mean, in a perfect world, if you want to remake a film and you're just doing it because it's a valuable IP that the studio wants to exploit in some way, you would reimagine it like he did Suspiria, which people did not like. I liked it.
I haven't seen it. But like, I don't know, David Cronenberg's The Fly or Werner Herzog's Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, both movies that have very little to do with the original, but are variations on a theme.
Yeah, the basic template, and then you make it your own. That's the most interesting remake. But nope, all most remakes do is want to remind you, wouldn't you rather be watching the original version that you like?
That's right.
And they'll keep making them, and it doesn't really matter because nobody remembers them. Do you know that there's a Jacob's Ladder remake that's been sitting on a shelf for 5 years?
Who's in it?
I don't know. No, but just sitting on the shelf. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It'll come out, people will forget it. It's like most films, when you say Total Recall, nobody goes, yes, the one was Colin Farrell, right?
Or they never say which one.
Yes. Like when I was
RoboCop.
When I was looking for Point Break on the streaming platforms and I clicked it and it started and I went, what is this? This is not Point. Oh yeah, there was a remake. It had completely fallen from my mind.
Yeah.
Until I was watching.
Same thing happened to me this week.
Yep. So yeah, reimagine remakes. If you're going to make them, why not just do that? But just make new movies. But it's not going to happen.
There will never be a new movie ever again.
Nope, never again. I mean, the live-action Lion King just was Disney's biggest live-action movie ever.
It's not live action.
It's animated.
It's a cartoon.
There's no live-action people in it.
I guess there's some grass in it that's real.
No, it's all computer-generated. They didn't even shoot real locations.
Okay, well,
it's animated. Yep. All right.
So this week on the Patreon, we're talking about another reimagining. By popular request, we've returned to the oeuvre of John Landis.
Yep, we're watching Blues Brothers 2000.
Why did we do this?
I explained it in the episode.
I still don't understand.
I texted you, regretted it instantly, and offered a different choice, and you went, no, let's do Blues Brothers 2000.
I wanted it.
Yep. So for $5 a month, you can listen to that at patreon.com/importantcinemaclub.
And next week's Patreon is going to be the listener choice.
It is going to be a listener choice. We'll just say it when we do next week's episode. Yeah. But remember, if you're a Patreon subscriber, I could message you and be like, what movie do you want to do? And also, like I said, that if you want a Blu-ray and you don't have one, you're like, I missed out. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you could get one. So become a Patreon subscriber. When you listen to this, message me, and if there's any available, I'll send them to you. There's a lot of ifs there, but when we started this Blu-ray project, I thought I would sell maybe 10. So I actually said when that page went live, I went, I should have made it 100. That's a round number. It looks better.
I thought 125 was a little much too, but clearly not. People loved it.
And the thing is, I make them on demand as well, so I just had to make 125 of them over one weekend. So, next week, what are we doing, Will?
We're doing another great filmmaker, Gerard Damiano.
Oh, yeah, Gerard Damiano. Let me just look at him on Letterboxd. Wait a minute. Almost none of his movies are on here. What is this, Will?
Gerard Damiano is the director best known for 1972's Deep Throat.
A porn director. And, as you pointed out, probably our first porn and nothing but porn director, right, except for one film, Legacy of Satan.
We've talked about Roberta Findlay, we've talked about Radley Metzger, but they also made a large number of mainstream films. But Gerard Damiano, he's in the muck. He is a straight-up porn guy.
But he considered himself elevated above that.
And he was somebody who, after the success of Deep Throat, used his clout to try to elevate the genre, to try to make artier, more experimental porn.
I would say porns that are not very erotic.
Oh, well, that's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
You know what? You're right. Even though there's yakety sax music playing over some of the scenes.
But some of his most well-regarded movies include The Devil and Miss Jones, Story of Joanna, Memories Within Miss Aggie, a very Bergman-esque film.
Yes. His 400 Blow Skin Flicks, which was recently released by Vinegar Syndrome.
Of course, Vinegar Syndrome is putting out Let My Puppets Come, his very strange all-puppet porno.
I would never have bought it because I know it's not good. I haven't seen it. But the package they put together, I'm like, well, I guess I got to get it now.
Oh, I've already pre-ordered it.
Yeah, you have.
Well, Let My Puppets Come, I have seen it in the 45-minute version. This is the fully restored 75-minute version. And I gotta tell you, your patience wears in the 45-minute version, so I don't know what those extra 30 minutes are.
Probably sex.
Well, puppets, fucking, probably.
Yep.
Check out The Satisfiers of Alpha Blue, folks.
All right, but be wary. These are hardcore films.
Yeah.
They're all hardcore pornography. Listen, we know everybody listening to this masturbates, so you can handle it.
Yeah, you've seen this shit before.
Yeah,
come on.
You have. And I'm really excited because, I've seen a bunch of his films, and, when he's on, he's on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to watch Memories Memories within Miss Aggie.
Story of Joanna, and I think Devlin Miss Jones.
Yes, and Deep Throat. We're going to have to talk about it. That was one that he dismissed as well.
It's an hour long.
Yeah, and he was like, it was just a lark that I did. Like, I'm just making a bunch of porno films.
Yeah, so if I'm not that active on Letterboxd this week...
That's because you're watching nothing but pornography.
Just masturbating furiously.
But taking notes at the same time.
With my one free hand.
With your one free hand. I'm a double-hander, so it's a little tougher for me, but I can do voice to text.
Already a very serious discussion about the aesthetics.
Well, I think that, like, pornography is very interesting with the context around it. Like, once you push away the, like, they're just fucking on screen, there's so much to dig into that people don't talk about. Like, even Gerard Damiano is barely interviewed. Like, I was looking.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, there's almost nothing other than a Roger Ebert interview.
I've got a DVD of Devlin Miss Jones that has a commentary track by him.
And it's just 'cause people don't give it any respect other than places like the Rialto Report, which we haven't mentioned in a long time.
Well, I mean, Gerard Damiano was interviewed extensively in, like, Skin magazines in the 70s, none of which is easy to find.
No, exactly. But, we're bringing it back into the mainstream.
That's right.
So that's what we're doing next week. And until then, I'm Justin McClure.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Justin here, just to provide a quick reminder that if you haven't followed us yet on Facebook, to please do so at the Important Cinema Club, just in the search bar. You can follow me on Twitter at DeclouJ, DECLOUX and letter J, or Will at Will Sloan ESQ. I'd also like to thank all of our new Patreon subscribers, and that includes David Stockdale, Matt H., Sutter Kane, Apple Ventus, John Megan Jr., James Cullen, Emalco, John Meyer, Jack Fenor, Matthew Thomas, Richard Harris, Ian Moss, Adrian Mary, Alex Smith, Alec Nelson, Austin Lancaster, Devlin Nicholson, Daniel Roth, Mark Douglas, Andy Stone, Joseph DeLeo, Evan D. Amaral, River Donaghy, Hildum96, Sweet Comrade, Daryl Atkinson, Adam Hart, OBD Films, and Zachary Hilton. Thank you very much for your support. This podcast could not continue without you. And now back to the regular scheduled programming.
Well, I saw Hobbs and Shaw this weekend, Fast and Furious Presents, and I saw it in a theater where the chairs, you could actually recline them. Not D-Box. You could recline them, though. Like, it was a lot of leg room, and if you press a button, like, it comes...
So you saw it at the Rainbow Cinema, or Imagine Cinema, Market Square.
And your seat leans back, and that was the perfect way to watch it. Just let the movie happen.
In the Coliseum. Just throwing them to the lions.
And just lie back so you don't even have to hold your head up, and then the movie just pummels you with pure sensation.
I was excited for Hobbs and Shaw. I like Dwayne Johnson. I like Jason Statham.
There's a missing ingredient in there. His name is Vin Diesel.
Yes, there is. And, I mean, you cut to the chase is that I'm like, finally, the weight of Vin Diesel, who is so lame in the Fast and the Furious films. And I should say, I love the Fast and the Furious films. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. I won't get into it. Love them, love them, love them, love them. And these two characters spinning off, sure, that'll be fun. It's directed by the guy who did the first John Wick, Atomic Blonde, and Deadpool 2. He's an action choreographer. There'll be good action. Yeah, I'm excited. And I saw it, and my friend summed it up perfectly. It's like a 2-hour MTV Movie Award opening.
Yeah, it feels very, like, ephemeral.
Yes.
And just like not a real movie.
No weight to the action scenes. It's not there, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not fun enough. You don't like the characters. They're bickering in a way that's just hateful.
Hey, you can put on these pants. Sorry if it's a little roomy around the dick.
Yeah.
Listen, mate, let me tell you something about dicks, huh? You ain't got a dick.
Yeah.
That's the banter.
And it feels almost disconnected. Like they weren't on the same set and they didn't know what the other person was saying. And did you read that article that came out on like Financial Times or whatever, where it said like Vin Diesel, The Rock, and Jason Statham would like only let so many punches land on each of them and they want to stand up. And when you watch a movie like Hobbs and Shaw, you're like, yes, I can see that on screen.
There's no, like, coherence to the movie.
No.
And the thing about Vin Diesel in these movies is he takes it very seriously.
Did we talk about Return of Xander Cage when it came out? Did you see it?
I did see it, yeah, and I enjoyed it. It was really ridiculous.
I love Return of Xander Cage, and it's a perfect example of why Return of Xander Cage, every member of the creative team is taking it incredibly seriously. Hobbs and Shaw, they're taking it as a joke, and they're like winking at the audience.
And they're also like, okay, well, this is a good business decision,
Yes.
this movie.
There's an insane amount of practical stunts in Xander Cage, as well as CG that is the perfect CG, where it's like Vin Diesel jumping out of an exploding airplane, being like,
I love this.
Yeah, I live for this shit. And like, Vin Diesel is so awesome in Return of Xander Cage.
I like the part in Xander Cage when he's like going to have sex with 5 women and he's like, I live for this.
No, he doesn't.
What was it? What the things I do for my country.
Yes, he slept with women and knocked them unconscious because he's such a powerful lover, just to get his fur coat back from the first movie. And he's like, the things I do for my country.
I mean, Vin Diesel, he's a very heterosexual man.
Yeah,
you know,
sure he is. Wink,
there's,
wink. There's no rumors
he
going
loves
around.
having sex with women.
Yep, and he also leaves them branded XXX skateboards. The film opens with a little boy going, "You bring the world to a Xander Cage." It's amazing, and it really shows that Vin Diesel was that. He's the glue that keeps those Fast and the Furious movies together.
It's sad that nobody likes to be in a room with him, but
Oh yeah, they hate being in a room
sometimes
with
real
him.
artists are difficult to deal with.
Brando Vin Diesel.
Exactly.
Did I ever tell you the story that I heard from like a friend of a friend that Vin Diesel, like Return of Xander Cage, like that's his passion project because he was being booted from the Fast and the Furious, and that another passion project he made was that long gap Chronicles of Riddick sequel,
Right.
where people hated him on set, and at a certain point, Vin Diesel like just turned to someone and was like, "Why does everybody hate me on set? I don't get it." And they're like, "You arrive 4 hours late, like." You're not communicative with everybody. You're difficult. Why do you think nobody likes you? But really, that's where great movies come from, I guess.
I think so. I mean, he's got the talent to back it up. Do you remember that for years he wanted to make a movie about his real passion project was a movie about Hannibal crossing the Alps, and he was going to play Hannibal?
I forgot that.
Like 15 years he wanted to make that. At the top of his IMDb.
I mean, I've told the story before, but bears repeating. You know that Rob Cohen called Steven Spielberg and asked, like, because Vin Diesel's in Saving Private Ryan, he's like, yeah, how is Vin Diesel to work with? Like, I'm thinking of casting him in Fast and the Furious. Steven Spielberg went, there's a reason he dies first.
Oh.